Across southern Arabia, satellite surveys traced ancient routes fading through the desert and found several of them converging on one remote oasis near the empty quarter. When archaeologists examined the site, they uncovered fortified walls, corner towers, a well at its center, and a section of ground that had collapsed into the limestone below. The place was Shisr. Soon, the ruins were being associated with Ubar, the legendary Atlantis of the sands, and with stories of a magnificent city lost beneath the desert. Some accounts went further, suggesting that the site might preserve the remains of a civilization older than Egypt. But the discovery contained a contradiction. The roads were real. The ruins were real. The collapse was real. The enormous lost metropolis was not. What stood at Shisr was a compact fortified settlement. Its walls did not enclose vast avenues or monumental palaces. Yet ancient tracks approached it from different directions and across great distances, as though this small place had once mattered far beyond the limits of its surviving enclosure. That was the first mystery. Why did so many routes converge on an oasis that seemed too modest to match the legend attached to it? From above, the tracks formed a pattern. Some crossed gravel plains. Others curved around dunes and ridges, vanished beneath drifting sand, and appeared again farther away. They may not all have belonged to the same period, but their convergence was difficult to ignore. Again and again, movement through the southern Arabian interior seemed to draw toward Shisr. On the ground, the answer may have begun with the well. Near the empty quarter, reliable water could turn an isolated point into a destination. Travelers could rest animals, refill supplies, exchange goods, and prepare for the next crossing. But water alone did not explain the walls. Stone foundations showed that the site had been occupied, altered, and rebuilt through more than one phase. Pottery connected it with activity beyond the oasis. Towers at the corners of the enclosure suggest that protection or control mattered here. Shisr was not simply a well beside a track. Someone had invested in defending it. And then part of the ground failed. Near the center of the settlement, beside the water source that had given the site its value, the surface subsided into cavities below. Walls approached broken ground where part of the original enclosure had been lost. The image seemed almost perfectly suited to the legend, a desert settlement built around a precious well, damaged when the earth beneath it gave way. It was easy to see how such evidence could be interpreted as the physical remains of a city swallowed by the sands. But archaeology does not show an immense population disappearing in a single night. The collapse was real, yet its timing and its role in the settlement's decline remain uncertain. The evidence resembles the legend without fully proving it. That uncertainty did not weaken the mystery. It deepened it. For centuries, Ubar had existed in shifting forms. It appeared in exploration, oral tradition, geographical speculation, and later retellings. Sometimes it was imagined as a city. Sometimes as a region, a people, or a center of desert trade. Over time, it also became entangled with Iram of the Pillars and with traditions concerning the people of Bad. These names are often treated as though they identify the same place. They do not come from the same kind of evidence. Shisr is an excavated archaeological site. Ubar survives through uncertain historical and geographical interpretation. Iram belongs to a religious and literary tradition. Their possible connection is strong enough to demand investigation, but not simple enough to declare solved. And Shisr seemed to contain just enough of the legendary image to make that investigation unavoidable. There were roads leading toward it. There were towers. There was a vital well. There was collapsed ground. Yet there was still no vast city. The more closely the site was examined, the more the public claim and the physical evidence pulled in different directions. If Shisr was connected with Ubar, then the legendary place may not have looked like the metropolis imagined in later stories. If it was not, then the convergence of routes, the fortified enclosure, and the collapse still required an explanation. The claim that the site might be older than Egypt raised the stakes further. The landscape around Shisr has a human history reaching far beyond its surviving walls. People crossed southern Arabia long before dynastic Egypt, and a water source may have drawn travelers before towers were built beside it. But ancient movement through a landscape is not the same thing as ancient architecture. The routes, the well, the phases of occupation, and the visible fortress may not all share one date. That distinction is crucial. Earlier activity could survive beneath or around later construction, but it would not automatically make the exposed settlement a city from before Egypt's earliest dynasties. The claim cannot be accepted or dismissed until the different layers of evidence are separated. This leaves the central problem unresolved. Shisr was real. It occupied an important position in the desert. It may have belonged to a wider system of movement and exchange. And something about its walls, its well, its roads, and its collapse was powerful enough to draw the legend of a vanished city toward it. But archaeology has not yet shown exactly where the site ends and the story begins. To understand that, the investigation must begin not with the city people hope to find, but with the desert roads that led them there. A careful cut is made into the bark of a boswellia tree. At first, almost nothing happens. Then a milky bead appears along the wound. It gathers slowly, thickens in the dry air, and hardens into a pale or golden drop of resin. This was the beginning. No glittering mine. No monumental workshop. Only scattered trees rooted in dry, stony ground, and people who knew when to approach them, where to cut, and when the tree needed to be left alone. The frankincense-producing landscapes of Dhofar do not resemble places that should generate distant wealth. Boswellia trees survive on rocky slopes and along dry valleys, shaped by difficult soil and seasonal moisture. Harvesters had to judge weather, timing, and the condition of each tree. A careless cut could weaken the bark. Too many could damage the plant. Once gathered, the resin was allowed to dry, then sorted and stored before movement. Some tiers were pale and clear. Others were darker, broken, or marked by dust. Quality varied, but every handful represented accumulated environmental knowledge. The trade began quietly, one tree at a time. Then the resin met fire. A small tier softened over heat and released white aromatic smoke. The scent climbed through enclosed rooms, masking ordinary smells and changing the atmosphere around it. A familiar space could become ceremonial. The substance was useful. Its distance made it remarkable. Across Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean world, frankincense appeared in ritual burning, funerary customs, medicinal traditions, fragrance, cleansing, and elite households. It could suggest purification, status, offering, or contact with the sacred. Its meaning was not identical in every place, and demand changed across time. Later Roman consumption became an important part of the trade, but Rome did not create its earliest movement. Different societies valued the resin for different reasons and through different routes. Still, every piece burned far from southern Arabia carried the same hidden story. The smoke might last only a short time, but behind it stood trees, harvest seasons, storage places, animals, wells, guides, roads, ports, and people who would never see the temple or household where the resin finally disappeared. To understand that chain, we have to move outward from the trees. Wadi Dhaka represents the producing landscape, where boswellia trees grew in the dry country of Dhofar. Shisr belonged to the inland world of wells and overland movement. Khor Rori became an important fortified coastal center connected with the incense trade during its own period. Al-Balid rose later as another major coastal settlement linked with maritime exchange. Today, these places form part of Oman's UNESCO-recognized land of frankincense. But they did not all flourish at the same moment, and they were not parts of one unchanging empire controlling the same trade for thousands of years. Their histories reveal different elements of a system whose routes, markets, and centers changed repeatedly. Tree. Gathering region. Inland route. Oasis. Coastal center. Sea. Distant market. Some resin traveled overland. Some moved toward ports and continued by ship. Some changed hands several times before reaching its destination. There was no single incense road in the modern sense. There were networks of passages shaped by wells, terrain, grazing, political relationships, protection, demand, and the changing advantages of inland or maritime transport. A route could divide around difficult ground, lose importance when a water source failed, or revive when a port or market became more active. A shorter path was not always the safer one. Travelers might choose a longer passage if it offered trusted wells, better grazing, or stronger protection. Access could depend on local agreements. Payments or exchange may have accompanied movement through controlled places. Security was often local, practical, and inseparable from knowledge of the land. This is why the tracks near Shisr require caution. Not every ancient line carried frankincense, and not every path belonged to the same historical period. Some may have begun as local passages between water, pasture, and seasonal camps before later travelers incorporated them into longer commercial journeys. The desert reused what worked. And what worked was preserved by people. Harvesters gathered the resin. Carriers moved it from the producing regions. Herders and animal handlers kept transport possible. Guides connected stretches of country that strangers could not safely read. Merchants arranged exchange. Guards protected valuable loads. Workers at wells and stopping places supplied water, food, labor, repairs, and information. At the coast, other hands stored cargo, loaded vessels, and carried the resin into maritime routes. Most participants never traveled from the boswellia tree to the final market. A harvester in Dhofar might never see the distant temple where the resin was burned. A guide might know only the country between two wells. A sailor might receive a cargo already carried through several communities. The system worked because each person understood one part of it. At every stage, the resin entered a new circle of trust. Someone had to keep it dry. Someone had to judge whether a container would survive the next crossing. Someone had to know which guide could be relied upon, which well remained usable, and where goods could safely wait before moving again. Its value grew not because the substance changed, but because each completed stage removed one danger from the journey. Safe storage protected the harvest. Reliable transport preserved the cargo. Protection reduced the risk of loss. Accurate information prevented valuable loads from being sent toward a dry well, a closed passage, or an unsafe stopping place. By the time the resin reached a distant buyer, much of its price belonged to decisions made far from that final exchange. Those decisions became most demanding in the desert interior. Desert travel was a discipline of limits. Cargo, food, equipment, and water competed for weight. Animals had to be loaded carefully and watched for weakness or injury. Travelers needed to know the distance to the next dependable source, whether grazing could be found, and whether the group could reach safety before its margin disappeared. And delay could be more dangerous than distance. A damaged strap, an exhausted animal, or a wrong turn could consume the cooler hours and force a group to spend more water before reaching the next well. A route expected to be safe might become dangerous. A known source might produce less water than travelers had been told. Before continuing, experienced travelers would consider more than the amount of water still carried. They would look at the animals after rest, the firmness of the ground ahead, the likelihood of grazing, and the reliability of the report they had just received. A route might be possible in one season and unwise in another. A well could still exist yet no longer yield enough for a heavily loaded group. Movement therefore depended on information. Guides read stars, ridges, dune shapes, gravel surfaces, tracks, and landmarks. Other travelers brought reports of grazing, conflict, market activity, and the condition of wells farther ahead. A group arriving from the opposite direction could confirm that a passage remained open, warn that animals had struggled there, or reveal that a market had slowed and another destination might now be better. News moving in the opposite direction could be as important as the cargo moving forward. In this world, water was measured not only in containers. It was measured in distance. A filled skin represented part of the journey between one reliable place and the next. Knowledge of water determined which route was possible, how much cargo could be carried, and whether a group should continue or wait. The empty quarter and its margins were difficult, but they were not unknowable. Local communities understood surfaces, seasons, landmarks, and the behavior of animals. What appeared empty to an outsider contained a geography of use and memory. The desert did not offer many second chances. So knowledge became a form of protection. Later organized overland trade relied heavily on the dromedary camel. Its ability to carry loads through dry country supported increasingly effective caravan transport across Arabia. But the familiar image of long camel caravans should not be placed in every ancient period. Human movement through Arabia long preceded mature camel-based commerce. Earlier journeys could involve hunting, herding, local exchange, and movement between water sources. The chronology of camel domestication and widespread pack use remains complex, and it did not unfold everywhere at once. Older practical routes could later be adapted into longer commercial networks. That does not make every ancient track a frankincense road, or push the surviving fortress at Shisr into prehistory. It shows that organized trade often grew from knowledge developed by earlier communities. As these networks expanded, stopping places that reduced uncertainty became essential. Seen from inside the trade system, Shisr begins to look different. A group arriving there would first need water and rest. Animals could drink while loads were lowered and inspected. Containers could be refilled. Damaged equipment could be repaired. Goods might change hands or be divided for another stage. Travelers could exchange news about wells, grazing, security, or activity farther along the route. The stop also allowed decisions that could not safely be delayed until the caravan was moving again. A weakened animal might be rested or relieved of part of its load. Packages could be tightened before they split on rough ground. A merchant could choose to wait for company, continue with fewer goods, or send part of the cargo along another route. Around the well, several parts of the system briefly occupied the same place. Animals, resin, water, tools, guides, carriers, and information all gathered within a compact space. The station's importance came from making these elements available together, not from the size of its population. No palace was required for these exchanges. No enormous population was necessary. A few fortified walls around a reliable water source could concentrate people, animals, information, and cargo at the moment when each became valuable. This also offers a cautious way to interpret the towers and enclosure. They did not have to protect royal treasure. They may have guarded access to water, supplies, animals, trade goods, and people resting at a strategic point. Storage, protection, transport, labor, or regulated access could all create influence or profit, though the evidence does not establish a detailed administrative or taxation system at Shisr. The walls show that protection mattered. They do not tell us exactly who set the rules. The economic logic is simpler. Frankincense already had value before reaching Shisr, but every safe stage increased the chance that it would survive the journey. A station could benefit by helping cargo cross the interior even if it produced none of the resin itself. Farther on, coastal centers connected southern Arabia with northeastern Africa, India, the Mediterranean, and the wider Indian Ocean world. Frankincense moved alongside other aromatics, textiles, spices, and valuable materials, though no single route carried every kind of cargo. Inland and maritime systems often supported one another. Roads brought goods toward ports. Ships extended their reach. But changing conditions could also make one route more attractive than another, reducing the importance of particular inland stages. For a time, however, the movement of incense could make a compact place seem larger than it was. Imagine Shisr as it might have survived in the memory of travelers. A fortified enclosure in a severe landscape. Valuable resin gathered near its well. Animals resting after a difficult crossing. Guides bringing information from country beyond the horizon. Relief at finding water where failure would have been dangerous. Such a place would be remembered not only for its walls, but for what happened there. As stories moved away from the oasis, the distinction between a place where wealth passed and a place where wealth was created could begin to fade. The station became wealthy. Then it became the source of wealth. The wider system of groves, roads, wells, settlements, merchants, and ports could be compressed into a single name. Later imagination might add what archaeology did not preserve: broader streets, greater towers, palaces, treasure, and the scale expected of a city associated with such valuable trade. This does not prove that Ubar was simply a poetic memory of the frankincense network. The relationship remains uncertain. But the legend may preserve the scale of the system rather than the scale of the settlement. That system was remarkable. Resin gathered from scattered trees passed through communities that did not share one ruler, one language, or one destination. It crossed dry interiors and open seas. It reached rituals and households far from the slopes where it first hardened on the bark. Yet the same structure that made the system powerful also made it fragile. Shisr mattered because travelers kept arriving. If routes shifted, demand changed, political protection weakened, or maritime transport reduced the need for inland stages, the value of the station could decline. No single catastrophe was required. The network could simply begin to thin. But at Shisr, uncertainty came not only from changing trade. It also came from the ground beneath the well. The oasis that had reduced danger for travelers stood above limestone capable of failing. Part of that ground eventually collapsed, damaging the settlement near the source of water on which its importance depended. What that collapse actually did, whether it caused Shisr's decline, accelerated a process already underway, or merely gave later legend its most powerful image, is far more difficult to determine. To answer that, we must return to the broken ground itself. The walls of Shisr approached the broken ground near the well, then seemed to lose their certainty. Stone foundations continue toward an area where the limestone beneath the settlement failed. Part of the central surface collapsed or subsided into cavities below, damaging structures around the water source that had once organized life at the oasis. That much is real. But archaeology does not reveal an immense city and its entire population disappearing into the earth in one catastrophic night. So what actually collapsed at Shisr? How did the oasis decline? How did a compact fortified station become associated with Ubar and Iram? What, if anything, was truly older than Egypt? And if the legendary metropolis has not been found, what was actually lost? Shisr was built around or beside an essential source of water. That water moved through limestone, a rock that can contain cracks, channels, and natural cavities. Over long periods, water may enlarge these weaknesses. A surface that appears firm can conceal empty spaces below it. Erosion, structural weight, repeated occupation, and continued use of the water source may have contributed to the instability. The evidence does not establish one exact mechanism or a single moment when every part of the failure occurred. It shows that the central ground subsided and that nearby remains were affected. For a settlement dependent on reliable water, this was more than damage to a few walls. If access to the well became difficult, structures around it became unsafe, or travelers began to doubt the stability of the site, Shisr could lose the quality that had made it valuable. Certainty. A caravan station did not need to be beautiful. It needed to work. Its water had to be reachable, its enclosure protective, and its position useful within the routes around it. But collapse is not the same as abandonment. A damaged settlement may remain occupied. Walls can be repaired. Activity can move away from unstable ground. A water source may become less dependable without failing entirely. Economic decline can begin before structural failure, or physical damage can accelerate a decline already underway. At Shisr, archaeology cannot establish whether the collapse caused the station's decline, deepened an existing loss of importance, or occurred after much of its traffic had already moved elsewhere. The evidence does not show every inhabitant fleeing at once. It offers something quieter, a place changing through time, suffering physical damage, and eventually losing the function that had once drawn travelers toward it. That function mattered more than monumental scale. Shisr was useful because travelers trusted its water, position, protection, and connection to desert routes. If another well became safer, if maritime transport reduced traffic through the interior, if political insecurity weakened protection, or if distant markets changed, fewer people would need the station. A place created by movement could fade when movement changed direction. What remains supports that kind of importance. Shisr contains fortified walls and towers, a central water source, pottery and occupation remains, tracks connecting the oasis with a wider landscape, and the collapsed area near its center. These remains demonstrate a real settlement position strategically within southern Arabia. They do not reveal a vast buried metropolis, monumental palaces, an enormous royal population, or streets extending beneath the desert. Yet a compact oasis could shape journeys far beyond the dimensions of its enclosure. Its importance depended not on how many people lived there, but on how many movements relied upon it. The modern search for Ubar began with a much larger expectation. Remote sensing and satellite imagery helped researchers recognize traces of old routes crossing the desert. Several appeared to converge toward the oasis region, directing attention toward places that required investigation on the ground. The satellites did not photograph a complete city beneath the dunes. They revealed patterns. Archaeology was still needed to determine what those patterns represented, and excavation at Shisr uncovered a fortified oasis with a complex history of occupation and a real collapse near its water source. That discovery was genuine. But locating routes and excavating a strategic station was not the same as proving that the legendary Ubar had been found. The ingredients nevertheless formed a powerful modern story: ancient tracks, ruined walls, a remote oasis, collapsed ground, and traditions of a wealthy desert place that had disappeared. Combined in popular accounts, they became the Atlantis of the Sands. The phrase gave the discovery a scale the ruins did not possess. A station associated with the search for Ubar became Ubar discovered. A collapse beside a well became an entire city swallowed by the desert. A site with several phases of occupation became a civilization older than Egypt. The public story grew more certain as the archaeological distinctions disappeared. This does not make the exploration false or the discovery unimportant. Researchers had located and investigated a real place connected with movement through southern Arabia. The exaggeration began when a plausible association became a completed identification. The name Ubar itself remains uncertain. It has been interpreted as a city, a region, a people, a trading territory, or a place within a broader network. These possibilities arise from different kinds of evidence and cannot all be treated as equally established. If Ubar referred to one enormous capital, Shisr does not match the expected scale. But if the name once described a region, group, or landscape of movement, searching for one great city may impose a modern shape on a more complicated tradition. Shisr could have been one important station within territory associated with Ubar, a later place that inherited an older name, or a real oasis onto which wider stories became attached. These remain possibilities, not conclusions. Iram belongs to another layer. In the Quran, Iram of the Pillars appears within the account of Ad, a powerful people destroyed after rejecting divine warning. The passage carries religious and moral meaning. It should not be reduced to an archaeological map, but neither should archaeology be used to dismiss that meaning. Later interpreters, storytellers, geographers, and modern writers sometimes connected Iram with Ubar. Through repetition, the names came to appear interchangeable. They are not automatically identical. The Quranic Iram, the traditions concerning Ad, the geographical or historical uses of Ubar, and the archaeological site of Shisr belong to different bodies of evidence. The claim that all refer to one confirmed city is a modern joining of those layers. Keeping them distinct allows the investigation to remain fair to both archaeology and tradition. It also reveals how a real landscape might enter legend. Travelers could remember an oasis where valuable cargo gathered. Communities could remember routes long after regular traffic ended. A structural collapse could become attached to a story of destruction. Several stopping places and settlements could merge into one celebrated center. Regional wealth became the wealth of a city. Towers grew taller in memory. Streets became broader. A gradual disappearance acquired the clarity of a single event, while religious and moral meaning gave that destruction a larger purpose. Archaeology cannot prove that this exact process created the stories attached to Ubar or Iram. But it offers a plausible model for how a real place may be remembered without preserving exact scale or chronology. The complete story now contains material from many periods. Human movement through Arabia reaches deep into prehistory. Knowledge of water sources and practical passages may also be very old. Organized camel transport belongs to later developments. The frankincense trade changed across different historical phases. Shisr itself was occupied and modified through time. The collapse near the well belonged to the physical history of the site. Oral and literary traditions developed in other contexts. Modern exploration and publicity added the final layer. These histories may have influenced one another. They did not all happen at once. Compressing them into a single moment creates the illusion of a prehistoric metropolis that controlled an unchanging trade network, collapsed suddenly, and survived intact in legend until satellites found it. The evidence does not support that sequence. This is especially important when testing the claim that the city beneath the desert was old before Egypt was young. Arabia preserves human activity far older than dynastic Egypt. People crossed, occupied, and understood these landscapes long before the pyramids. Their knowledge of water, grazing, coasts, and interior passages had deep roots. But ancient human presence is not evidence for an ancient city. Later traders could reuse passages first shaped by hunting, herding, or local exchange. Yet the age of movement across a landscape cannot be assigned automatically to walls and towers built beside it. The oasis itself may also have drawn people during different periods. The same water source could be used, left, and used again by communities separated in time. But long-term use does not mean one fortified settlement stood there throughout that history. The surviving structures at Shisr belong to later archaeological phases. They have not demonstrated the existence of an enormous urban capital built before dynastic Egypt. The verdict is direct. The evidence does not support the claim that archaeologists discovered a great prehistoric city at Shisr, older than dynastic Egypt. What may be older than Egypt is not the exposed fortress, but the human knowledge beneath its history, generations learning the position of water, reading the desert, moving between usable passages, and adapting inherited routes to new forms of exchange. An ancient landscape is not the same thing as an ancient metropolis. What, then, was Shisr? The evidence supports a cautious answer. It was a real fortified oasis and stopping place associated with movement through southern Arabia. Its well-concentrated people and animals. Its enclosure offered protection. Its position connected it with changing routes. Its structures were affected by collapse. And as a place linked with valuable trade and physical ruin, it may have contributed to later stories of a wealthy settlement lost to the desert. That conclusion is less spectacular than the discovery of a vanished metropolis. It is also more revealing. Once the search moves beyond one impossible city, another kind of disappearance comes into view. A human system faded here. Routes between water sources ceased to carry regular movement. Relationships between communities weakened as goods shifted toward other paths. Practical knowledge of wells, grazing, protection, and safe passage lost its purpose when fewer people made the journey. Most of that world was never preserved in monumental stone. Tracks fade. Containers decay. Oral knowledge disappears when nobody needs to teach the next journey. A route can vanish even while the ground beneath it remains. That may explain why the legend eventually became larger than the ruins. A fortified well seemed too small for the wealth remembered around it. Lines across the desert remained visible without revealing the journeys that had created them. The scale of an entire network was compressed into the image of one magnificent city. From above, the faint tracks still approach Shisr across the desert. They do not lead to a vast metropolis. They lead to a well, fortified walls, and broken ground where animals, cargo, information, and human decisions once gathered. The roads show that people came. The well explains why they stopped. The collapsed ground gave later memory the image of a place taken by the earth. Shisr was real. Its importance within the desert network was real. Its geological failure was real. The magnificent city remains unproven. But the vanished world behind the legend was larger and more complex than any single ruin. The desert preserved its traces, not as a complete city, but as the scattered outline of a world.